Hello. Hey, Charlotte. Can you hear me? Hey,
Hello.
how are you? Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Just checking in. Awesome. How's your morning been?
Good. I just had my second lunch club chat.
Oh, I keep meaning to do one of those. Do you like them? But let us.
The last one was kind of fantastic. I met the founder of an accelerator who's living in Madrid, but getting ready to move from Madrid, I think, to Palo Alto because he's going to start up another community and stuff over there, and just like super knowledgeable, and just like it was a perfect fit, honestly. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Huh.
It's pretty solid. I'm actually, based on this conversation, planning to up the lunch club recommendations to have them introduce me to like 3 people a week.
Oh, wow. Okay. I
So
will.
it's really
I'm,
people outside of your network, high quality people, and you just would not be on a call with them otherwise.
Mark, so did I hear that you like Lunch Club? I got invited to do one. One for New York, one for Boston. Which
nice.
one? I didn't do one yet, but which one are you in?
So this one, it's as far as I know, just virtual. And so I'm just doing calls with people literally all around the world. I just got off a call with somebody in Madrid, and it was solid, like really good connection so far.
Yeah, because the invite only, from what I heard, is supposed to be higher caliber folks in that group.
It is.
Nice.
Yeah. Hey, Camille. Oh, she needs the Zoom password. Skill time. That was in the invite, right? Did I do that? I think I did. Password. Yes.
I don't see.
I kind of just guess. I know it's the password is scale time.
Yeah, same here. I did the same.
No, it is in the description. All right, Alice just she pinged me. She was like, "What's the password?" Cool. Well, I'm excited for her. Got some great stuff, and then we're waiting on a couple of people. I think Jeff is joining us. Said so this morning. Who else do we have? Dennis might join us. All right, cool. I think maybe just those two. Brian, do you know if Alex is joining us or he can't? Nope, that's a no. Okay, cool.
Yeah, he's out of office today.
Oh, that's right. He's taking the day off, right?
Yeah.
Good for him. And just so you guys, anyone who's new, just to kind of like give you guys a little bit of the format. When Alice gets in here, I've been talking about her, so I'm gonna do like a very tiny introduction, and then there she is. I was just talking about your tiny introduction. So I've been talking about you all week, and I'm just basically like, Alice is a badass. Like that's kind of it. So, really talking about, human resources, the nitty gritties, the good, the bad, the oogly, and the icky, all that good stuff. And then also performance, right? And really, I know a lot of people are asking about performance these days, and also offboarding, which is a sticky situation. And also, I told everyone that you've been also hiring a bunch of badasses with very fancy credentials, which, yes, these are my very topical introductions, and really getting to the heart of what's happening on a macro level, right, in society in general, because we've I think it's been like almost a month of a plague, depending on where you are in the world, give or take 2 months. So That and just like massive amounts of burnout and debt collection, both for good and for bad, with the PPP and the IDL and the PPP again and all the things, right? And so there's just seems to be an overwhelming sense of like burnout across the workforce, right? So like, I know we only have an hour, so feel free to speak fast.
I'll go as fast as possible.
Cram it all in. And these guys are pretty smart. They're pretty sophisticated. I'm gonna go for like 10 minutes and ask some questions. I'm waiting on 2, but they'll just kind of come in and do their thing. And then I'll open it up to the group, right?
Amazing.
Alex, yeah. And as I said before, like I really I like these conversations, right? These Tinker Talks, to be as open as possible, because it's not, they're invite only for the reason that we keep them very intimate, because we want to get to the questions that we don't always get to ask.
Yes.
Right? And Alice, like, I know every single time I email you, I have like out of office responded. So like, I feel really lucky that you're here.
Oh my gosh, I'm so thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so I'm gonna shut up now with your introduction, and I'm gonna go for it. So I guess one of my questions is, what is the top mistake you see people when they're building a team?
Ooh, there's so many. How do you pick just one?
All right, top 3.
So I think that, the first thing I would say is hiring too quickly, I think, is one. So I'm a big proponent of the thing that you've probably heard every old manager you've ever had say, which is hire slow and fire fast. But I think that really taking the time to make sure that the person who is coming on board is somebody who not only needs a job, which unfortunately right now in the world that we're living in is something that's happening more frequently, but also that they want the job at your company doing the work that you need done, that they have the prior skills and expertise to do it. Sometimes a great way to test that is even to do some kind of initial engagement, right, where it's 90 days or a contract or whatever makes sense for your business, but to really test them before you bring them fully onto your team. Really take that time up front. Second thing is not firing fast enough, which is part of the second part of that. But when someone isn't working, the faster you can make that decision, the better it will be. Nothing ages worse. Not even moldy cheese ages worse than a bad hire. So I would say get somebody out as quickly as possible. And then from a regulatory perspective, a thing that we see pretty commonly, and I think can often be challenging for marketing agencies, is also understanding your potential liability around who you're calling a contractor, who you're calling employee, how you're treating them. There's a business reality to some of these things, right? Where you may not be able to bring on everyone as an employee, even if that's what your state is mandating. And so you bring them on as contractors. And I think that that's fine and a reasonable business choice. It's more about making sure that you've consulted, you understand the risk that you're taking, you understand the potential financial liability you would be facing for misclassification, and you're comfortable with that. And if you're comfortable with that, you're good to go.
All right, cool. So a follow-up to that, because a lot of our members have this awful syndrome. And I call it the nice guy, nice gal syndrome, right? And I'm privy to this too, right? Where it's just our people, they're trying to create a team, they're trying to do the best for their employees, and they want to give chances to people, right? Especially in a small business environment.
Yeah.
And there's also an avoidance of the fucking pain of hiring another person, right? And so then you're stuck in the moldy cheese limbo of having someone who just isn't, a great performer, but then the sort of opportunity cost of getting someone, so you're just kind of weighing the two. What kind of advice would you give to, nice guy, nice gal, who's holding on to moldy cheese?
Yeah, totally.
For me, like forever. Stuff.
So, I think the thing is that like moldy cheese doesn't get better. I think that's for thing. But the other thing, well, there's a few things. Let's start with getting prepped for somebody. And this is part of the hire slow piece. When you're bringing somebody on, it's incredibly important that I try not to use jargon. Some people might, so you might call them OKRs, you might call them, you might call them goals, you might call them all sorts of different things. But what really matters is you need to understand very clearly what is the result you need that person to produce, and what is the activity you expect them to take in order to produce that result. If you can't say that in less than one sentence, you're not clear enough to hire somebody, right? It's got to be that clear to them, and it's got to be clear to them what they need to do every single day. What is the activity that you want them to do, and what's the result you want them to produce? And I think what we see a lot is people focus on training people in activities, but don't focus enough on the result that you need them to produce and holding them accountable to that result in a short period of time. And so I think that needs to be communicated to somebody in their first 90 days with your company, literally every day. And I know some people are like, wow, that's a lot of communication. It's too much. I want to hire people who are really experienced and I don't need to. But the thing is that it becomes really easy to let someone go when you know for sure that you have been clear with them about what the activity expectation is and what the result expectation is. Because then at the end of even 30 days, you're like, hey, we've talked about this every day. You haven't produced a result yet. Got to go. Right. And so I think it makes it feel like you're not being mean or you're not being unclear or you're not being a bad person. Right. But rather, I'm running a business. I hired a person to do this activity that produces this result. If those things aren't happening, you can't be part of the business, right? We're all achieving this together. So that's number one. Number two is that I think the thing is that you can take a stand for somebody and you can be a champion for somebody. And that doesn't necessarily mean they have to stay in your business, right? There's a lot of people I've had in my business who I think are extraordinary human beings, who I think are really great at certain things, who were a terrible fit for my business. And that might be because my management style is very hands-on and they are, you know what I mean? And that doesn't work for them. It might be because we work at a pace that's very, very quick and very different than kind of what people who are in HR are typically used to, right? There's a lot of reasons that might not have anything to do with whether you're a great person who can do great work and I'm a great person who needs great work. And so I think that thing too of kind of being able to have the clarity around the first piece, right? What's the activity and what's the result allows you to be able to have those conversations separately. And so to really separate those two things, both for yourself as a manager before you talk to the person, but also in talking to that person, right? Really being clear about, hey, I think you're amazing at these things. I saw this potential in you. I still think you have it. I think you're extraordinary in these ways, but that's not producing the result my business needs, right? And separating you're a good person or you're a good worker or you're a person of value from what result they're producing for you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And to follow up on that, in terms of like the return on investment of an individual, how do you, and I mean, we could talk about this for days, right? But like super quickly, how do you measure the return of of an employee, right? I'm, maybe just a high level, and if you have any resources, kind of send them our way, just to kind of touch upon it.
Yeah. So my feeling is, this is one of the challenges, I think, particularly of small businesses, because we usually don't hire until we need somebody to be producing. But when you hire someone and you need them to be producing very quickly, that's usually a challenging scenario to set up for someone, particularly within a closely held business where you might have a particular way of doing something. So I like to say to my clients, if at all possible, I want you to be hiring somebody 60 to 90 days before you need them to produce the results, because it will often just take that much time for them to get up to speed, to learn your culture, to learn the language you use, to learn your processes, right? To do it in the way that you need it done. From there, I would say that I think it should take about another 60 to 90 days for somebody to figure out how to optimize the role that you're putting them in. So you're really not going to have a sense of where someone is until you're like 4 to 6 months in, if they're producing. But at that point, they should be doing everything that you want in the role, right? So you should have a role defined ahead of time. You should have the activities and results that you want them to produce. And those things should be clear to them and to you from day one, and they should be communicated often and frequently. If you reach the 90-day point and they're not doing half of the things on there, even if they're not doing them entirely, but they're not doing half of them in a way that feels good to you, it's time to go. It's time to find a way kind of out of that scenario. Did I answer your full question with that? I feel like I didn't.
I was looking more for like a formula, but we could talk about that later. But the answer that you did give was really good in terms of the expectations of what we need in terms of results, because I think a lot of the times people don't attach a timeline to expectations, right? Mm-hmm. It's either like they should have everything done on day one. Why are they not producing results? Or it, sometimes it's like, it's been a year. We're still waiting for them to hit that magical motivation. Yeah. So I think that's really clear in terms of developing some sort of timeline around that. All right, I'm gonna ask you two more questions. One is a three-parter.
Let's go.
And I'm gonna open it up to the team. So I'm gonna call this the SSSS. How do you manage social media, sex, and stress?
Yes.
Right, so social media, especially for these guys, because they're like living in social media, which usually as marketers and marketing agencies, that's part of their gig, right? But we all know that, and there's stats upon stats. I don't know how this has changed with the pandemic. It's probably gotten worse, about productivity time being just completely sucked by social media. So that's kind of one. Managing stress in the workplace is two. And then managing not sex, but like I know in corporate, there's a lot of thing about, like people have to kind of have this HR thing, like if you're dating and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But like in small business, most of us, I don't even think we care. Like we're just like, I just want to know about it. But should we? I don't know. So that's my question to you on the SSS.
Super. So social media, you're going to kind of give me a way to talk about one of my soapbox things, which is great, which is that I think in some respects, again, I'm just going to sound like a broken record, but if a person is doing the activities that you want and producing the results that you want for a price that you're willing to pay them to produce those results and do those activities, I think in some respects, you shouldn't be caring what they do the rest of their time.
Yeah.
So like I'm hugely against, for instance, there's a lot of these productivity softwares that especially this year have become really huge where you can like record somebody's screen and see what they're doing. And I'm like, if you don't trust your people enough to do their work, you shouldn't have them working for you. You don't need something to record what they're doing all day long that you're only going to use to go check and see if you don't believe them. And in which case you should be talking to them like a human being and not checking a videotape is my personal belief. So I think, you can certainly have a policy that says like, hey, limit personal social media during the day. But at the end of the day, if they're producing everything that you want, I don't really think it matters. And I think the reality is as we move to a more distributed workforce, I think everybody's doing it now. I think pretty much everyone, at least in professional services, I think is going to keep doing it. Why have the overhead if you don't have to? I think there's really very limited amounts you can actually do to control that. So I think the bigger focus is on, on making sure that they're producing the results that you want and having a system in place, whether that's a project management system or performance management system to really track that thoroughly. The only other thing I will say about social media that's happening a lot right now is having some policies about what people can and can't post and how that might come back around to your company. I think that's something worth everybody considering right now. And just, pretty basic. I don't think it has to be complicated, but anything you wouldn't say professionally in a professional context to a colleague is not something you should say to them on any other channel. Same thing with clients. And like, something along the lines of, hey, if you do something that reflects poorly on this company in your personal life at all, we're going to have to talk about that, right? And we can talk, depending on where you are in the world, the legality of what that needs to sound like is different, but I think it's worth having. Okay, stress. So I think it's really important to help yourself and your team have structures in which there's work time and when there's not work time in their life, particularly when everyone's working from home and particularly when there's a global pandemic, right? So what are ways that our clients do that, right? Or how we do it. We encourage people to have a workspace that's distinct from other spaces in their life. It might be as silly as I sit at this end of my dining room table to eat and this end of my dining room table to work if you're in a small apartment. But this idea that there's a dedicated space for work and that's where work happens and then work can shut down, right? It's like my computer stays there when I'm done. I think that if you're working in Slack or Asana or Trello, whatever you're working in, I would recommend that you look at your admin functions and have hours where that turns off notifications to the team. A lot of people are like, but if they want to work, yeah, I know, but everybody's living in their house right now. Everything is kind of blending into each other. Help your team have a little bit of a break. They can still check it if there's not a notification, but just get those notifications off. Do yourself the favor too of really helping to define these are our core work hours where we're all working and collaborating together. And then I don't really expect you to answer outside of these hours. If someone's writing you emails or doing this, and if you're running a business such that there has to be 24-hour coverage, get specific about that. This is when these people are covering and this is when these people are covering. But really helping people to have a distinction between work and life is extraordinarily important for helping folks to manage stress. I think other things you can do is right now the world is kind of devoid of surprise and delight. Like I used to love riding the subway and like, running into an amazing busker, and like that kind of lit up my day, hearing amazing music when you weren't expecting to. All of that is kind of out of people's lives right now because we can't really do that. So I think to the extent that you can surprise your team with little bits of delight, I think it can be all sorts of things, right? It could be everybody gets an Uber Eats card. It could be, something silly like we're having, during 5 minutes of DJ time during a team meeting where people get to take turns DJing and dancing. This past week, we don't normally observe President's Day on my team, but my team felt a little burned out and I gave everyone a surprise day off and they were super pumped, right? But it's just this sense of like paying attention to your team, finding ways to bring some delight, some fun, some lightness into the work, I think is really important. And sex. Okay, so I'm an HR person. There's a lot of people in my field who are like, put in a policy of non-fraternization. I'm like, I won't do that for two reasons. One is humans are humans, and I don't think you can actually legislate sex. And two is because I met my husband at work, and so I'm not going to put a policy in that would have prevented the best relationship in my life. So, but I do think that there is some value in what we would call a declaration policy, right? So basically saying like, hey, if you have a relationship, please let us know. And generally that people can't manage people who they're in an intimate relationship with, right? Or report directly to that person. The reason why is because, in many states, California, New York, and Massachusetts being primary among them, but ever more increasing, a company can be held liable if there's sexual harassment in between two employees. And the thing that we actually see most frequently in terms of claims for sexual harassment is relationship gone wrong, right? It's we went on a date, one person was really into it, one person really wasn't. The person who really wasn't says, hey, I'm not into it. The person who was really into it continues to pursue. And now you have a sexual harassment situation in your workplace. If you have a policy that says you have to declare, gives you a lot more opportunity to kind of address that in a way that protects your business. And that's ultimately what I think everybody wants to do. So
cool. I have more questions, but I'm going to open it up to the group. And thank you so much for that, Alice.
Yeah.
And I think you spoke at an appropriately high level because these guys are amazing. And you guys know the protocol. Just kind of unmute yourselves. If there's two of you that unmute yourselves at the same time, I'll break the tie. And if you have a question that you will not remember, just stick it in the chat. So that's how we do. All right, go for it. Com, you've always got a question.
Sure, throw me out there. No problem. How vulnerable is too vulnerable when you are being open and honest with your team?
Oh, that's a tough question.
That's why Julianne picked me.
Boom.
I know. That's why she picked me. So look, I think that the question is really, in some respects, about. So I have a concept that I teach when I teach management, which is, I call it productive negativity, right? And so the concept basically being that you should be as negative with your team as is necessary to produce a positive result. But if the negativity goes beyond that and it's just like me as a human wanting to scream and throw things, that's probably not a good thing to bring to work. I think it's the same with vulnerability, right? So it's as much vulnerability as is productive for you within the culture that you've set. And so much of that is specific to the culture that you've created. But for instance, I had never cried in front of my team until this past year when I had to furlough most of them. And when I sat down to tell them, I wept on the call. And like, I was really embarrassed, but that amount of vulnerability, I think actually made them feel like really feel in a way that they hadn't felt before. Like I didn't take salary for a few months before I furloughed them. Like it was such a personal decision to me. And I take so seriously caring for them and their families that the crying actually made them feel like I was in it with them, right? That I was like, I really deeply, deeply cared. That was productive. Now, do I think sobbing incoherently so that I couldn't speak would have been as productive? Probably not. So that's my general answer, Com. If you have a more specific question, I'm happy to answer it.
No, it's because like you read all of these leadership stuff, right? It's like being vulnerable, and it's like they give you little examples here and there, but it's like, I guess it's like you almost have to like know your culture and your people, right?
Totally.
And I know my team, I'm very comfortable where they know me, and we can pretty much get pretty real. So we had to have this conversation back in March during COVID, and I was like, look, if things go sideways, guys, like we're gonna have to like make cuts.
Yeah.
And people stepped up. So because when you talk about plant these seeds, people get a little nervous, right? So it's like, how much do you give them without negging them out? I mean, people gotta neg out anyways, but when I mean, everyone's always talking budgets, but that's just a reality. It's more in the forefront. People are afraid to talk about money all the time, where the company is. So it's like, how often, I guess, too, do you do like a pulse check to let, because employees are probably wondering if they're not privy to leadership information. So how often do you give that pulse check to a company?
Yeah. So again, it kind of depends on how you're doing it. I think, there's some amazing performance management softwares out there that we partner with that will actually send a pulse survey to people, and you can set it up to do weekly or monthly or however you want to do that. If you don't have a survey, right now with my own team, I'm checking in about twice a month, and I like to actually just require everyone to do a temperature check on one of our team calls. I'll be like, cool, stress level 0 to 10, go. And
Is
then
that
I just like
anonymous, Alice? Is that
no, that's not anonymous. When I do
okay?
it with my team, my team's pretty small. There's 7 of us, and we have a very high level of kind of comfort, So another thing is like this truth to power kind of conversation. So we do a lot of work when we're onboarding in 90 days with people being willing to kind of say to me the thing that they don't, that might have been scary in another context, right? And so we're able to do that. But yeah, I mean, there's a great and I'll send it to Juliana. There's a great little Slack bot that does anonymous polls. And so if you want to do it anonymously, it's really easy to do it through that Slack bot.
Oh, that'd be
And
awesome.
so I would,
Oh,
I think that's an easy way to
that's
do
the
it if you
baby
feel
crying.
like, oh, I can't hear them. You're good. Oh my gosh, hi, baby.
He's a pro, so he's got
Beautiful.
Yeah,
But yeah.
Alex, if you can send us that bot, and then maybe like the questions, like I don't know if you've got like a templated survey question for that would be
Yeah, but so usually it's just, it's like, what's your stress level? What's your capacity level? You know what I mean? How much are you enjoying your work? Are the 3 easy questions, and we're happy to write those up and send those over. But I think those are the easiest ones to kind of just check on people with.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
And then I have a follow up to that one, and then it looked like you were about to hit the unmute button, but vulnerability of financials, right? So I get this asked a lot by clients, is like, when, how often, where do you share your financial information, or how much do you share of your financial information? Because some teams are like, here's my P&L. No one knows how to fucking read that, right? Other teams are like, here's our numbers. And is there context to sharing the numbers, where and how often, cadence, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I think that it depends on the level of leadership that someone's involved in your company. I generally think if you have a senior leadership team, something like that, P&L is a great thing to show folks. I think that particularly senior leaders often can look at cost cutting in a way that maybe you haven't thought about yourself. So I think that that's valuable. For a general full team, I don't think that full visibility is particularly useful for 2 reasons. One is that if you haven't really been a manager involved in running a company before, I think people will look at things and not really understand the particular costs involved with some of these things and be like, well, that seems stupid, and you don't really want to open that conversation with everyone on your team. But the second thing is also that, it's hard for people to, and this goes back to kind of what's the productive amount of information to share. You don't want people to be so scared about not being able to feed their families that they can't do good work, right? And so part of your job is to kind of create that safe space for them. What I do on my team is we basically share. It's a way to do top line. So, but instead of giving them actual revenue figures, I give them percentages. I say, here's our goal for what we want to bill every month. Here's our goal for what we want to receive every month. How are we progressing about that? And the document is live. I update it weekly, and then we talk about it monthly. And then, we talk about the prior month closing, and then they can see at any point during the month how we're kind of progressing against those goals. And then, we give some context, right? So like I say to them, for instance, I don't get worried about anything until we we're running under on a 3-month average, right? Because there's some seasonability to my business. So, December was high, February is low, doesn't really matter, right? I'm still averaging the last 3 months, right? That's the context for our business. It's easier to kind of share some of that because they know operational decisions we make, right? Like we have an operating reserve, and that's something we've been able to maintain, right? So there's things about that, like that can kind of give people some comfort. But I think you do have to give enough context that someone can feel safe, is the answer.
Cool. Anybody's got a question? All right. I mean, I can go for days.
Sorry.
So,
Oh, yeah.
go on me.
So this is a little sticky wicket, but so let's say that you have identified a very wrong fit employee.
Yeah.
However, they are super enthusiastic and always like a big cheerleader and yay team, and they actually, from a motivational standpoint, they like keep everybody else's motivation up. How do you like X them without like killing your whole team's morale?
Yeah. So I think I mean, the short answer is you have to be as compassionate to that person as possible. If they feel like, if they've been a cheerleader for the team and everybody's been really excited about them, you know, I think there's two pieces to it. One is they have to be exited in such a way that it's kind of not a surprise to them, right? Because so that, you know, you're kind of talking to them about their performance. I mean, I think termination should never be a surprise, but I think particularly when somebody's a huge part of a culture, it should absolutely not be a surprise at all. So you have to be talking to them about their failure to perform consistently over time and, you know, making sure that you've given them opportunities to improve. And then when you're exiting them, you're actually exiting them because there's no possible chance that they can improve. I think, you know, the timeline for that should still be short. 30 to 60 days, I think is fine, but you need to like be extraordinarily clear. So there's absolutely no surprise in the offing. The other thing that I would say is that after the termination, you know, instead, sometimes you notify people by email. I think to the extent that you can have a team meeting immediately after and just talk about it, you know, in a very straightforward way. I think you know, we've talked about vulnerability here and I think that's great, but really be vulnerable, right? Like, hey guys, this was a really hard decision for us because this person has been extraordinary as a team member in all of these ways. And we don't want to ignore or gloss over how important that's been and extraordinary that's been for our team. Ultimately, though we can only afford people who can be great team members and also produce results, and that was not happening, you know. And so, but and then I think you can also, you know, I mean, give it a little time, but then also offer it as a call to action. Hey, you know, we know we had to let go of so and so. This was kind of sad. Are there other people on our team who feel like they have something to contribute to culture, who can, you know, ask an interesting icebreaker question, you know what I mean? Like lead the team in some kind of activity, whatever you know makes sense for your culture, but just acknowledge and then invite. And sometimes you'll be surprised. Other people might step up once they've seen that example. Yeah, of course.
Very cool. Anybody else? I have
Hi.
Oh, hey, go for it, Charlotte.
Hi. Yes. Just wanted to ask about when can we be lenient to our um our our employees, or and when can we be strict in implementing our policies?
Interesting. Do you have a more specific example question, Charlotte? I'm just wondering if I can kind of help with a particular
Yeah.
challenge.
Currently we're creating a habit of posting their daily activities on our chat. So we have like checking everybody's how are they doing with the day, because all of us are working remotely. So we're just I for some time I've been monitoring those this has been, you know, happening for a quite some like 2 weeks already, and I just noticed that a few of our employees are not doing the policies, or what we wanted to create a habit of that. um I'm not really sure when can I call them out, if or should I call them out, or just keep reminding them like on a general note, and not calling them out on by themselves, something like that. So just wanted to check if how can I when can I be lenient and when can I be strict on a
No,
certain policy.
I love that, Charlotte, and that clarity really helps. Okay, so overwhelmingly, my feeling is that when you're trying to get your team to adopt a new habit, you know, depending on what we look at in behavioral social science, that takes somewhere between 30 and 90 days. So my feeling is that the reminders have to be as frequently as you're asking them to do it, that they don't do it for that entire period of time. And then after that, you can kind of let up a little bit. But I think when you're really trying to get your team to develop a new habit, it needs to be very, very frequent. I'm a big fan of doing immediate and direct kind of feedback on that when someone is missing it. I think that, shame and humiliation are really powerful, and you don't really want to unleash them on your culture if you can help it at all. So I think it should be really direct to that person. Hey, you missed this. Can you please do it today? Hey, you missed this. Can you please do it today? And I think, again, when it's a new habit or a new opportunity within your organization, it should be brief, to the point, clear, and positive for probably the first 60 days, right? And then, if they're still not doing it after 60 days of you being that way, right, then we have a different issue, right? Which is maybe insubordination or something like that. But I think when you're really talking about that habit, do it directly. The other thing I will say is I think sometimes humor in a group context can be really helpful. So when you're on a team meeting and say something like, hey guys, we're doing this new habit. Some of you are doing awesome. Some of you still have a way to improve, make a little self-deprecating joke about like what your challenge is with that on that, and get people to laugh about it, and just kind of bring it into the collective consciousness that way. Another opportunity that sometimes really works is in new habit adoption. If there's someone on your team that is an exemplar, that's doing it extraordinarily well, praising that person in a public context and then kind of pointing to them as somebody who's an expert might also help struggling team members. So that might be a way to do it too.
Yeah, like for us to motivate their other employees. Okay, thank you.
You're so welcome, of course. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Alice, are you a believer in scorecards? And if so, what makes a great scorecard and process for scorecards?
So I think that I'm a big believer in performance management, and I'm a big believer in that being measurable. I think what people think of as scorecards can be vastly different. So if you want to give me more specifics, I can tell you that. But I do think measurable performance is absolutely critical. Do you want to give me a little more context, or just do you want to hear my general thoughts more?
The context is no, I'm in a company of 2 people. We're hiring a couple new people. And so we're just kind of building this all out. So I don't even have a thing to point to.
Okay.
Oh, and Alice, in more context, I hammered them to death on scorecards.
Fantastic.
You must have a place to put your measurements.
Yeah, no, you absolutely have to measure people. And I think the clarity is really about, again, what is the activity you want them to take? What is the result you want them to produce? What is the timeline in which you want them to do that? And then I think the other thing that is often missed when we're talking about scorecards is you need to tell people, like, not just like, so for instance, let's talk about salespeople, right? Oh, I need you to make 50 calls a week. I need that to produce, 2 bottom of funnel leads every week, right? But if the leads that are coming out of that are total garbage, it's actually not going to help you, right? So I think there also has to be some kind of qualitative part of the measure, or an example of what excellent is, right? So it's like, yeah, here's your score from 1 to 5, and 5 can only be achieved if it looks like XYZ, right? Because I think sometimes that's the piece that we miss, and not really helping people to understand that. In terms of what I like to measure, I think, are they doing their job? Which again is really that activities piece that we talked about. I like to measure something related to values within your organization. So whether your company has values that you've worked together to actually express, or they're just the values that you as the business owner have, I think really saying like, this is how I want you to treat other people internally and externally. And I expect you to live aligned with those and get measured on those as well. And then whatever goals that they set for themselves are related to your company, strategic goals, which can sometimes be related to the activity that they're doing, but also can sometimes be, in some respects, distinct from it, needs to also be measured. Is that helpful?
It is. And, one piece of that is, so we do have a lot of long-term contractors that have been working with us for like 2 years. And so I actually have a Google form where we go through kind of like a scorecard whenever we remember to do it, which is not enough. But one thing that I've noticed is like, I'm always pushing, like, what are your career goals? What are you trying to develop, like outside of just doing a project with us? And then trying to like hold them to that, but they're contractors, not employees. And like, so if they're doing the job well that I want them to do, but I'm not seeing them like striving or like working on the things that they're saying they're going to work on that are kind of bigger, I don't really have a way of like holding them to that. And it's like, I'm going to keep hiring them for this job because they're doing okay at it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess my question is anything different with contractors?
Yeah. I mean, look, so technically, I mean, there's the legal side of this and then there's the human side of it. I think when we're talking, if you consider them to be a team member to the effect that they are a core part of your business, you should be treating them like you would want any human who's a part of your business to be treated. From a legal perspective, doing performance management with contractors opens you up to more issues than if you treat them entirely like a contractor, right? So, you have to kind of split the difference on that for yourself. I think the question of how do you motivate people to stay committed to a goal that they have set for themselves but are not pursuing is, there's two pieces. One is really helping them when they're setting the goal to set a SMART goal, right? So it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. So they actually are putting it into a time period that they're going to do. The other thing that I would say is that sometimes when people are not moving forward, it might be about resource, which might be time, or this year, like, I don't have any more mental energy. This entire pandemic year has been stressful. So sometimes a really easy way to help someone with a goal is to say, hey, I know we talked about this. This was really important to you. How can I help? What can I do to support you in doing this? And then do the thing that they ask for. And if they're still not interested, I think that's on them. But that would be my advice there, Brian.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
To layer more on that, because I this is a challenge I run into too. Like, from a human standpoint, you work with these contractors. They've been with me for 2 years, 3 years, but we don't treat them like employees. So we don't, like, I'm trying to keep them accountable because, like, okay, you've been with me for 3 years, but lately in the last few months, like, you've just been fucking up. Yeah. So how do I be like, hey, I'm trying to help you here, but you've been fucking up, but you're not my employee. So get your shit together or you got to get fired.
Yeah, that's right. So are you asking how to say that more kindly, or are you asking is that the right approach? Like,
that's not how I talk. This is unfiltered, a safe space here. But like, so like, for example, I have a video guy and he's doing great. He's been with us for but he's growing his agency too, right? So we outsource it. But like, let's say like he makes these edits and he's making these easy, simple mistakes. And it's like, we give him grace, but it's to the point where like, is there a way, do we do like strike one, strike two, strike three? Like, how do we approach that? Do we say it the same way to an employee, to a contractor, because they're technically team members? Yeah. Or do I have to say it differently?
So I don't know that you have to say it differently as much as I think it really needs to, because my feeling is that if someone's not producing the work, it doesn't matter really what context in which they're working for you. They have to hear that. I think the thing is making sure that it's really clear to folks what's going on, right? So one way to do that is to have a written policy where it's like, this is how many strikes we give people, right? Another is to have a really clear conversation that just is like, hey, I've loved working with you for the last 3 years. The product that you've been producing lately has not been up to snuff. I'm happy to give you another 2 chances, but if we don't get back to kind of where we were before, I'm going to have to look for another resource, and just be really clear. But the thing is if you're going to be that clear, you have to pull the trigger when you say you're going to pull the trigger. Do not, you know what I mean?
Am I like documenting an email? Okay, that's strike one, like saying it like that, or is it more like in passing?
So, I mean, I like to have conversations face to face and then follow them up with an email documenting. So just to be like, hey, because I think the thing is, if someone's going through something that you don't know about, if somebody really genuinely didn't know they made a mistake, like those are all things that are better in conversation. But then I would follow it up with an email just being like, hey, thanks so much for the conversation. Really appreciate it. Just to reiterate, we're really looking forward to returning the high quality of work you had before, but, we only can really afford to have a mistake 1 or 2 more times. Right. And just be really clear. I think it can be friendly and kind. And then at the end of the day, the person on the other end of the conversation gets to decide if they want to do that or not. Right. That's not up to you. But you know that you've been clear. Yeah, of course.
Alice, I know you have a great sort of cadence for managing people, and you've done iterations on this over the years. Even your own team, you got like the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the scrums, the slacks, the polls, the things. Can you just kind of tell us sort of what that management stack is, really quickly? Because I think it'd be really helpful for everyone to kind of listen to that.
Sure. So when someone onboards to my team, they will spend 30 minutes with me twice a day for the first 45 days, which is intense. But, I think remote onboarding is hard. I think understanding exactly what I want from work product is hard. And I think that ongoing iterative feedback really removes the sting from it. I think if you're looking at somebody's work once a week and then they just get a red line copy from you, it feels very different than like kind of hearing every day, oh, I like this. I didn't like this because, right? And so we do that. And then at that point, they graduate to 130-minute for the next 45 days. And then they graduate to once a week, a one-to-one with me. And that's what everybody keeps for the entire time that they're here. We do team meetings twice a day. It's essentially Scrum kind of team meetings twice a day for 30 minutes for my whole team, which is at this point 8 people plus me. And then they meet with each other to work on projects based on whatever projects they're assigned. And that cadence is usually driven by the project. So, but not usually more frequent than once a week. In terms of performance, we believe in iterative ongoing performance. So that happens in the work pretty much every day. I I offered them this year to do formal performance reviews and they said no. They prefer the ongoing kind of iterative approach. And so, like I said, we do that check-in with kind of the temperature checks every 2 weeks. We do an annual strategic planning session for our whole company. That process happens in December of every year for the upcoming year, and it aligns with our budget process. And part of that process is them setting goals for themselves for the upcoming year. And then we put their goals in the budget. Right. So we kind of know what their goals are. We allot professional development funds for the team. And then we kind of check in on those goals on no less than a monthly cadence throughout the year and their regular weekly one-to-one. I think I covered everything there.
Yeah, thank you. And then I had another question for you.
Yeah.
This is my dead corpse question. So when someone leaves, yes, Mark. So when someone leaves, right? And this happens to a lot of owners, then there's like, especially because since we're doing systems and we're doing processes, you find like all the dead corpses is like, oh shit, they were doing this, they were not doing this.
Yeah.
Account managers were handling things really differently, right? Or it looked on the surface like it was all good, but now we're, so I guess 2 questions. Like, one, is there a way to prevent that? 2, what do you do in terms of morale with the rest of the team, right? Because this is a question I'm proxying for someone, right? So like the rest of the team kind of like doesn't want to like snitch on the person that just got fired because it's like weird, right? Because they're like, oh man, yeah, we kind of knew it was happening. We weren't really sure. We didn't really want to say anything. Like now it's kind of weird. And like all this shit like needs to be kind of fixed for going forward, right? So kind of curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is one of the ways I like to avoid this is kind of structural. So I generally feel like a manager can kind of really actually successfully keep their eyes on somewhere between, the social science research tells us it's up to 12 people, but I think in a small company, that's probably too much. I think 5 to 10 is probably the range because I think you're going to have more dead corpses if you're one person trying to manage 50. Like you just won't, you're going to miss something. You won't see it until it's kind of too late, both from a performance management perspective and from a, sometimes client loss perspective, right? Like if someone's not watching someone's work. So I think structurally, if you can kind of keep it lower, you'll have a much better chance of seeing someone's work. I think another kind of structural thing that you can do that's kind of a funny thing, but is actually usually pretty true, is either setting people up to work in teams so that, somebody's strengths overcome somebody's weaknesses. People are having some kind of overlap for each other. And then also pushing people to take at least a week-long vacation, right? Like usually if someone's gone for an entire week, it's kind of hard to keep everything hidden if they're gone for a week or 2, right? So if you can do that, you or somebody else will get your hands into that work and you'll be able to see it more. But the other thing that I like to do is, I think there's a movement where it's like, I want everyone to be an adult. I want to train them and have them be done once. But I think I like to really just do spot checks on the things that I know, an individual struggles with. And I think, again, that goes back to having no more than 5 to 10 direct reports because you'll get to learn your employees, learn where their struggle pieces are, and go directly at it. And I think that's the skill as a manager is to, if there's something that somebody's not great at or somebody's avoiding, you have to go right to it and address it directly as soon as you know that it's an issue for them. And then going back to the conversation we were having with Charlotte, and then help them to develop that habit, right? Bring that thing up with them consistently, right? Ask about how it's going in Scrum, whatever that piece is so that they can get it up to strength. the final thing I'll say about that is not everybody's good at every single thing. I'm a big proponent of the idea that not everyone should necessarily be entirely well-rounded, but rather you should kind of put stars together so that they can kind of fill in each other's gaps like this, as opposed to like being two well-rounded things that kind of just bump in one place. So, I think it's also about really thinking about what your team dynamic is like and helping people who have a real strength in one area to pick up for someone who has a strength in another area. It's not the, and then, yeah, I mean, I think the other piece is probably the piece Juliana already has you do, right? If you have your system set up correctly, you should be able to see when someone's not doing something that they're supposed to do, and make sure, even if it's, at midnight, you have time to go check that, right? Like once a week, there's a task in my Asana to go in and look at everyone's Asana on my team and see if there's someone in there not checking off, just, it's, management isn't always fun. Part of it is just holding people accountable,
I call it review hell.
Yes.
That's my all right, Ami.
Thanks,
And
Ami.
if you have any questions, put it in the chat so we can ask. But you left. Okay, that's okay. So another question: how do you ensue your team with culture? How do you have them like kind of drink the Kool-Aid, especially when it's a small team at the beginning?
Yeah. So small team at the beginning, the thing that's, fortunate and unfortunate about that is that you're going to be the culture, right? So the example that you set, the behavior that you imbue, the kind of the behavior that you hold your team accountable to providing is going to be the culture of your organization entirely, probably up until you're, at least 20, maybe bigger than that. And so I think, a lot of that, I know it sounds kind of weird when you're like, how do you deal with employee culture? And I'm like, sleep. But that's really like part of what it is. It's like you as the owner have to be in a place where you can set a culture that you think is good. The other thing I think is really important is being really clear with yourself and also with your team about what good behavior looks like on your team and what poor behavior looks like on your team. Right. So for instance, when somebody does something that doesn't work, talking to them about it immediately and directly, and then also kind of, when people are doing real things that you want to see in your culture, you praise them, within whatever kind of your culture is, right? So for some people that's kind of sarcastic and other people it's really earnest, but there's this sense of kind of like group praise and group approval when someone is exhibiting the kind of organizational behavior that you want to see. I think that it can really help to engage around, in your strategic planning sessions and your annual planning sessions and your team meetings, bringing in whatever values and culture you have actually codified and written down in and around your team, to do that, to kind of bring it up often and kind of use exemplars of it as much as you can and praise people who are exemplars of it. But most of it is interpersonal and behavior at the beginning.
Cool. Anybody else have any questions? All right. I have a proxy question. Unless Brian, you look like you were going for the unmute. Ish.
I guess with culture, it kind of aligned to culture. Like how are you guys sounds like are doing a good amount of team meetings.
Yeah.
How are you setting those up to kind of foster that culture and just keep them being happy, positive meetings?
Yeah. So so it's funny, somebody asked me about this recently. I judge the kind of health of my team as to how much people are laughing on those calls. I know that's kind of silly, but I think that if people are happy at work and they're playing around with each other, that generally means things are going well. So if people are not laughing on calls and all those calls are very serious, I'll take one of those checks that I do every 2 weeks, like how's people stress, capacity, are they enjoying their work? And I'll move it up. The thing is when I ask that question and then I'm expecting to hear that stress is higher than, normal. If it is that case, then I think the answer is that you have to jump in and be an advocate for that person. And what that means for me sometimes is that my work goes by the wayside because someone needs help and someone needs the opportunity to feel like they're successful at work and needs more support. And at a small organization, that often the only resource for that is you. Another resource for that is taking some off their plate and putting things on hold if you can do that. But I think ultimately this idea of I see somebody struggling and they always get help is one of the easiest ways to kind of help keep that positive culture going. The other thing is that we make very intentional time for us to just be people together and not just to work together all of the time. And so the simplest way we do that is we have a 5-minute every day somebody on the team is assigned to ask a question to the rest of the team, and they get to choose whatever they want. Sometimes it's icebreaker questions. What were some from the last week? Do you have any tattoos, and what are they? Was one. Another one was, what is your favorite go-to meal? Another one was, tell me about your favorite person in your family. It can basically be anything that someone wants. I do not allow sexual questions, but other than that, you can pretty much pick what you want. And we just spend 5 or 10 minutes being human with each other on that every day. And then I think creating some spaces for folks to connect with each other that are related to work, but not necessarily about work. So for instance, I pay everyone on my team to have a coffee date on me once a quarter. So everyone meets with everyone else on the team once a quarter. They get together, they can expense, I don't know, 10 or 20 bucks, and they can buy themselves a meal and have like lunch together, or they can like get coffee and hang out together. And they just get to spend that time being colleagues, but not having to do work together. For new people, when new people join, they have to do one with each colleague for the first 3 months. So it's like 3 months, and then it goes to quarterly for them. And then for everyone else, it's quarterly. We offer an exercise class that I pay for that's optional for the team, but it's just for the team. So it's for the team. And then if they want to bring their partners or their kiddos, they can do that too. And then we also have a cadence, which we paused and maybe you should revisit, where sometimes the team has done a thing where they, on a monthly cadence, someone will share an activity or something that they're interested in with the rest of the team, and then everyone does it over the course of a month, and then we get together and kind of talk about it at the end of the month, right? So someone gave a Pilates workout one time, another person gave a recipe, someone taught us all how to meditate one month, right? But so there's kind of like, it's like a lunch and learn, but less about the content of the work and more about the life. But then we also do give people the opportunity to do that kind of lunch and learn where they're sharing something they've learned that's related to our domain expertise, but gives people an opportunity to shine, practice, presentation skills and something that they're interested in on work time during work as well. So those are some ways that we do it. I don't know if that entirely answered your question, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah, no, those are all great. I was taking notes frantically.
Good. Hey, Tom.
Just
Yeah, well,
pretty badass rock star. Like, these are amazing stuff, Alice. I want to come join your team.
And you are all here on a recruiting. Not kidding. So, Alice, I just want to do a quick time check. Do you have a hard stop at 2? Can you go for 5 minutes over?
I think I can go 5 minutes over. Let me just check my calendar. I don't really remember. Yeah, I'm good till. I'm good.
Okay, because I had 2 questions.
Sure.
And I want to know if I had time for 1 or 2. So one question is, so here's something that happened to one of our scale tribers. Everything that's happening, in terms of, Black Lives Matter, the protests, the coup, the stuff,
all the things,
all the Wednesdays, right? Yes. So like all the Wednesdays, and there was a team member who asked for they brought up a complaint to one of our owners, which was saying like, hey, like you haven't touched upon this with the team, right? Like you haven't addressed any of this. Some of us are kind of pissed off about the fact that as a company you haven't addressed it. And I think I need a mental health day, right? So couple of things, right? Like as companies, especially small businesses, like should you be addressing this? How much time do you allow, for mental health around this? Because it is affecting a large, population of our employees. And how do you sort of manage the balance between, yes, we want to take care of our people and we still need to get shit done because we don't have the big corporate budgets to like be, as cushy as we want to be, considering all the things that are happening. So I know it's like a very heavy question, but
yeah, no, I mean, and it's one that we're dealing with a lot, right? Because when our clients don't know what to do, they call their HR team, and we're like, we're living this too. And so I think the thing that I would say is, I think first of all, I would only address it if you're able to do it authentically and continuously, right? So what I mean by that is whatever choice you make to address it is something that you have to be willing to do when it comes up again. And I think the thing that we're seeing in the world is it's going to come up again and again. And I think this last year has probably felt like that to folks. So for instance, I don't want you to say, hey, if you're really upset, please feel free to take as much time as you need if you're not going to do that every time this comes up. But with that being said, I do think that the reality is that this affects some people more than others. I think that each individual needs to judge what works for them. You know, some people when they're upset want to come to work, right? Like this in some respects is not different than other types of grief or loss or overwhelming feeling that someone might experience for other reasons that we would let people take time off. So one of the easiest ways to do this is to allow people to use whatever sick or paid time off that they already have for this if they need to, right? And just, you know, to say that to folks. I think another thing that's really simple to do is just to acknowledge that it's going on in the world and then it's having an impact on you. I do want to warn people that in some states, you know, political association or political belief is a protected class. And so we don't necessarily want to make value judgments or say one thing is right or one thing is wrong, but rather kind of acknowledge it broadly. Hey, this thing is happening in the world today. I understand that it might be upsetting for someone. If you feel like you need support or you need to take a mental health day, please feel free to come talk to me. I would be, you know, I'd really want to be here to support you and make sure that you're okay. Right? Because that's something we can do no matter what's going on in the world for our team. In terms of talking about it and addressing it within a context, I think that it is fine to do that. I don't, you know, there's two approaches, right? One is we're going to take on, for instance, anti-racist work as an organization. We believe that's extraordinarily important. You know, we're going to commit part of our budget to putting a program in place, hiring the consultant who does this type of work, offering this training to everyone on the team, like really commit to the work. But if you're not going to commit to the work in that way, then I think it's about acknowledging that it's happening with your team and saying, you know, if people want to have ideas on how we might do this within kind of the reality of what we're dealing with here, you know, in terms of our work and our organization, let's talk about that. But overwhelmingly, I think it's my view is that for small companies, you authentically do it, which means putting your time and money and resource behind it, or you authentically don't and just kind of keep the focus on supporting your team. Is that helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because there's a lot of just kind of pontification about doing things and not actually putting time, energy, and resources around it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that kind of distinction.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really big distinction. So it's not just like some performative corporate BS that you're trying to do as a small business, but you can't actually back it up. So that's my thoughts. I have one last question if you guys got to go, just to kind of let you guys know on the 5th, there's going to be another Tinker Talk with Brandon, who just exited his agency. Alice and Camille, if you want to join us, you're happy to join our Tinker Talks as you're now part of the tribe. And he's going to be talking about finances and incentives, as well as you guys can ask him questions about exiting. But I have one last question for you, Alice. And then also Camille, I don't know, is there anything you want to share? Because are you just here for the listening? It's either or.
So like Alice said, I'm new to the team. I'm the new program or partnerships manager. And so I'm still doing my onboarding. And so I have never heard her speak before. And so I have truly enjoyed this. I do want to let y'all know that everything she's saying is 100% legit. Like I said, I've been on since about mid-December, a little bit, probably late December. And every step that she has said that she has laid out for the team is 100% accurate. So I know a lot of the times folks, especially in HR, kind of tell you what to do and kind of you wonder, oh, are they really practicing what they preach? I can guarantee you Alice is doing that. So really, outside of that, this has been really informative, really enjoyed it. But outside of that, no questions, not yet anyways.
All right, Camille's got the credibility bomb.
Yeah, and I didn't pay her to say that, guys, I promise. I didn't.
I second Camille because I'm just letting you guys, I'm starting to work with Alice and she's badass. So.
Okay, so I have 2 questions if you have time for them.
Yeah, let's do it.
One is, what are you seeing globally around burnout? Just like trends and just kind of, you know, I know we talked about stress from like, how do you deal with it, you know, from like an onboarding standpoint or like, you know, from an ongoing pulse check. But I'm just kind of curious to, you know, you've got a pulse on the market. What are you seeing on burnout?
And
So
I
I
want
think burnout.
I just
yeah.
want to layer into that because this happened live internally. They said, "Com, you said in the meeting that burnout is an option." I never said that in word verbatim, so I don't know how that they articulated that in the meeting. But how do people avoid that? Because all I said was, "Hey guys, like I never asked you guys to work extra hours or whatever. So like you control your time, do what you need to do for yourself to work your day." So I don't know if it's just so they were like, "Com, you made it sound like burnout's an option." So I'm thinking that's what they took that statement as, but I never came out and said it. I don't know if I ever shared you. I don't know if I shared you with that yet.
I don't
Alex,
think you did. No,
but
that's
but
fascinating.
that's what actually that's what Kala said in one of our meetings when I was like when she was telling me about. So I don't know if I can layer
We
it.
know how we feel about that.
Yeah.
So
Look, my feeling overwhelmingly is that it is in some respects your job as the business owner and certainly as a manager to have a sense of how your team is doing. I think that when companies are going through financial stress and there's often not enough resource and there are global pandemics and things like this going on, sometimes people are going to get burned out. What's clear is that you need to be clear about the expectations is what I'm asking of my team. Number one, easiest check, something I would be willing to do myself. If it's not, and I don't mean that like I like this type of work. I mean, like, is it reasonable for me as a human being if I was being asked to do this, that I could do this as a human? Like, that's number one check. If the answer is no, you probably shouldn't be asking somebody else to do it. But number two is also just kind of like, how are the results producing again? And I think if you're addressing this through performance management in terms of ongoing iterative feedback, really tracking someone's work, really holding them accountable, talking to them as soon as they're not performing, some of this won't happen. Or it'll just be really clear very quickly that they're burnt out because it's a poor fit, right? And I think a lot of people will say, well, I'm really stressed, I'm really burned out, when really what it is they're not. They don't know how to be successful at their job and they haven't gotten the support to do that. In terms of what's going on in the world right now, I think there's something very real. I think particularly for people who are living in small apartments, for people who have all of their children at home and are attempting to work with them on their laps, like it's not an easy time to be a worker. How do you help people with that? By being as compassionate as you can and giving them as much as you can while also holding them accountable. When people are not doing the work that they are supposed to be doing, it erodes their own sense of worth and accomplishment. And so I think the thing that I do want to say to folks is that it's not, I don't think, useful to not hold people accountable because the world is hard right now. I think instead it's better to have a conversation that is direct and being like, hey, you're not meeting what I need you to meet. How can I support you in getting to that place? Or giving you some flexibility, taking some things off your plate so that you can be okay with doing less, right? Operationally, whether you can handle that as a business is a different conversation, but I think that, but that's the case. How else can you support this? There's a lot of great work around. We really like Carol Dweck's work around growth mindset. There's a lot about resiliency and grit out there that's really helpful. But I think you help people building it by being their constant champion, and helping them understand the difference between you supporting them as a team member, and you supporting them as a human, right? And what I mean by that is the phrase that I use with my own team is, hey, I already think you're amazing. You wouldn't be here on my team if I didn't think you were amazing. This work is not amazing, but that's not a reflection of who you are. That's a reflection of this piece of work. How can I help you get this there? Right. And I think that if they feel like you're on their team and you are, going back to the very beginning of this call, helping manage stress by kind of setting boundaries around work, not asking someone to do something you wouldn't do yourself, you're probably going to be 90% of the way there.
Cool. And then our last question, and then I'll let you go, is, keeping it super reals. What is the advice you wish you could give more often that you haven't already told us, right? like if you were just able to, as service providers and experts, we all have those moments where we just want to take the person, shake them, and be like, "Ugh!" So is there something that you wish you could do more often, and you just, sometimes you don't, because whatever, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I mean, the one that's always true is I think you should almost you should just fire the person. Like, I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but it's just like, you know, because a lot of people come to me and they're like, should I put them on a performance improvement plan? I don't know. I think maybe they could be better in this circumstance. Or I really love, you know, kind of going back to Omi's question, like I love their culture fit. Maybe I can move them into a different role and they'll be successful. And all of that is lovely. But you're running a business. This person needs to do a job for you, and that's the basis on which they get to have a relationship and all the other amazing benefits and culture and access that you get to provide them. So, you know, I think the sooner you can rip that Band-Aid off, just do it. Just absolutely do it. Just do it. That would be number one. Number two is the advice I would give myself in retrospect is don't wait too long to get help. You know, I think I've run my business in a very cash flow positive way, and I tend to be very conservative. And so like I didn't hire because I like to have a big cushion, which in some years has been great. But you know, I think I didn't get the help I needed as soon as I could have, and I think it delayed my growth. So I think, you know, to the extent that you can really treat people as an investment and invest in them, I think you can, you know, and I think right now, particularly with the gig economy, there's lots of options to have great, extraordinary fractional help. And so if you feel like you need help, I would say get the help. What's another thing that I would say to people? Definitely pay your taxes. I know that's a silly one, but do it. It's always worse when you don't pay your taxes. Just do it. And pay what you owe. Just pay it. Yeah, I mean, and I think the other thing I would say is work. You know, I have this yay behind me, and people are always like, why does an HR person have yay behind you? Don't you have to like term people with a yay behind you? And I'm like, yeah, but work can be fun. And I think that I want every entrepreneur to believe that they have the right to have a team that makes it a joy to come to work every day. Because if you love your team and it's a joy to come to work every day, it's not hard to be their champions. It's not hard to spend time training them. And it's not hard to like do the best you possibly can to offer them the most money and the most benefits and all that stuff. And then everyone gets to kind of treat work as play. And so I think if I could say one final thing, it's you deserve to have that. And if you don't have that, you need to work towards it. Yes.
Boom. All right, Alice. Well, thank you so much. I know I'm going to be hitting up for some of those resources because you rock. And then also any sort of management books or, you know, must reads for new managers and things like that, especially because I know our group, you know, sometimes we've got employees who are being turned into managers and they've never managed before. So any sort of resources around that would be huge. And as always, thank you for being you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. This was so fun. And thanks everyone for the questions. I love how active this group was. It was amazing.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll send you, you know, transcripts and yada, 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 so that you can have all the things.
Amazing. Sounds great. Thanks everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.